think we're about to roll live. Let me know if you can hear me before you receive the video feed. If you can hear me fine, just leave a note in the chat, that will help a lot. Alright, I think we are ready to roll. Let me know if you can hear me, if you can see me. There might be a bit of a delay in the chat. I'm gonna test the sound really quickly. Do let me know if you can hear me. Hey everyone, I see quite a few joined in the chat. Can you hear? Yeah? Cool. All right. So if all is good, I can crank up the music as well. I don't know if you can hear the audio on your end. There is a soundtrack. I'm just trying to test things out. How is everyone? Leave a few notes in the chat. You know, how's your day? What's your busy with a weekend? What are you looking forward to in this stream? Because today I'm going to review 7 submissions, and it's probably a record one. You know, it's a 7th prototyping and UX research, like UX end-to-end challenge. You know, you decide what was the scope. And so 7 people actually submitted, which is quite crazy given, you know, the history of, you know, trying to get people involved. So it's amazing. Cool. All right, and I'm receiving some compliments as well. Spectacles, yeah, that's my HD glasses. All right, let's jump into it. I think we have quite a few people on the actual live stream. I hope that people who submitted the different bits actually are gonna join in, because I have a lot of feedback and they're really, really exciting submissions. So right off the bat, let me recap exactly what the challenge was about. So what I asked you to do is really to take a look at specifically, but not limited to, the Vodafone customer experience when it comes to offboarding and service cancellation. And it's notorious. Ultimately, you know, there is a lot of things that could be improved. As any other big business, they run like a dinosaur ultimately, and I might be butchering it, you know, who knows what happens behind the scenes, but ultimately I went through and mapped out my own personal, you know, N=1 journey of trying to cancel one of the broadband options I had with them. And I went through their website. I noticed that I could only do it by calling them or doing a chatbot. I was like, wow, I might as well do it a chatbot, because that might be easier. I don't need to recap my information, which I had noted down. And I just went through a lot of different support people, and I tried to communicate with them, explain exactly what is what. And eventually, after almost 30 minutes, I got my broadband cancelled, but with an extent that I also had to pay a lot and things of that nature. So what I asked you to do is really to look at it and consider exactly what you could be doing with it, because Vodafone as a business have their goals, they have their needs, they have their quotas and margins and, you know, targets set by their shareholders, which we need to match, right? And on the other side of the spectrum, you have the customers who you need to provide better user experience. And so that was asked, basically consider the actuals, consider the business needs, but also, you know, consider the dilemma of kind of facing both challenges and then producing something better in the end. So some people chose to research, some people chose to do it end to end and make actual case studies. And I see that JP is saying almost as bad as Adobe's cancellation experience. Yeah, well, I mean, it's typical, isn't it? I mean, it's almost like, you know, I feel quite bad singling out specific provider, because ultimately, like almost every other big conglomerate are having these type of issues. And, you know, it comes under that quote-unquote dark patterns label. In reality, it's outright criminal patterns, if you ask me. But hey, you know, it is what it is. Anyhow, So we got quite a few different submissions, and if you're all ready, we can dive right into it. You know, we don't have to kind of like go around in circles exploring this. I think everybody watched the video of the actual brief. A call to action, by the way, if you haven't, make sure to watch it, because you know the reason why I made this challenge is for you to make side projects, for you to make to kind of get ideas of what you could be doing, because a lot of juniors, midweight, seniors even, who work under NDA, they are like, oh, I'm stuck because I cannot show anything in my portfolio. Well, this is the call to action for you to actually take this brief and make something so you can actually show it in your portfolio. Depending on your experience, you might be junior, well, you might do a bit less. If you're more senior, you might go more in depth and much more strategic lens application of it. But you can solve it and you can document it, and then you can add it into your portfolio, and you know, the rest is history. Anyhow, let's do exactly that. I'm gonna show you exactly what people submitted, because some of them were quite senior, others were quite junior, but you know, it's totally fine. It's like, it's exactly what you're doing. You're doing it for yourself ultimately, and hopefully Vodafone is going to take some ideas and actually make some project to readdress those experiences. Anyhow, the first submission is by Luca, and if you can see on my screen, I immediately brought it up. He made it basically on his personal side. And Luca made a proper case study. So he went and I think maybe spent a month, I don't even know what he did, but he went and kind of just figured, well, I might as well just go all in and just make a proper exploration, a discovery, and then come up with a solution so I can actually use this in, let's say, I don't know, job applications, or maybe getting more clients, right? So right off the bat, he shows, you know, a solution, some sort of touch points in a digital realm. He's saying that he redesigned the mobile plan cancellation process for Vodafone. The goal is to help retain customers, but also provide better user experience for the customers. So I like that he actually, you know, covers both, not just user, but also the business ultimately goal, that origin, but kind of ties in the dark patterns as well. The only thing what I would improve immediately here is really just jig it up this title, because, you know, service cancellation is just a noun, right? I would add a little bit more, like, I don't know, like reimagining Vodafone service cancellation experience, or making Vodafone service cancellation better for our customers, something along those lines. So like whoever, like let's say if I'm a hiring manager and I'm reviewing it, I can immediately tell exactly what was done, instead of kind of trying to read into the detail and then trying to understand what is what. So just basically the marketing of actual stuff and copy. The process. So this is good that he outlined basically building a case, research, analysis, design, exactly what steps he took. So he introduces me, you know, what to anticipate ultimately, because he could have done a lot and he decided to choose these type of activities. In UX, again, you could take 100 steps basically and, you know, arrive at similar or different conclusions. It really depends. And this is where we kind of go into it. As you can see, he's saying why providing great offboarding experience is important. So he's trying to break it down and kind of extract different bits. So retain existing customers, enhance customer satisfaction scores, leave good impression, referrals, understanding client motivations, things of that nature. Now, all of these insights, I would be like, where are you getting this from, right? He might be kind of outlining further research down below, and I don't know about that, but he would... Oh, background music is tad too high. All right, let me see if I can lower it down. That should be a bit better. Thanks for feedback. Do let me know, by the way, in the chat, you know, like your thoughts, if you have any feedback for actual people who did it, you know, it's all good. Let's do like a proper communication instead of just me rambling, you know. So anyways, I would be very specific exactly where do I'm taking these insights out of. You know, it could be that it's human psychology studies, it could be that it's reviews, it could be a lot of different things happening, right? Like where do you take those insights? So it would be good if you, let's say, consider just adding a bit more to it. He outlined some of the process bits like a photo, then dives into research and says understanding the users. So he's trying to analyze the flow, basically the insights. 1, customer retention, convoluted process, lack of consistency, too long of experience, I guess. But he basically analyzed, I guess, the current flow, which I'm briefed him. Again, would be good to reference exactly, because a person who might not know about this, they might be like, well, what are you even talking about? So always try to reference bits. If you are stating something, provide some evidence or some backing, like where does it come from? And even the user research, let's say, as you can see, he's saying online communities are great research, yada yada yada, but which online communities did you engage? Be specific. Like, why the hell not? It's just gonna add more credibility to your statements because it's gonna be backed by something. Negative customer experience, rely on social media, routine. These are basically the insights, I guess, he took from the actual brief, which I captured, but I would then go a bit further and maybe even dig into the drivers, into human behavior, psychology of it as well, because that would add a bit more weight to actually user research. Because these are almost like, it could be a symptom, like routine, it's something you could draw a little bit, kind of broader conclusions, let's say, or more specific conclusions, even if you describe what it is. And then he analyzed basically with affinity diagrams, customer journey maps. I guess he outlined exactly what it is there, tried to do that, which is great because then you can actually understand what the experience is like. The opportunities of making it, again, linking it up a little bit would be better. Or actually, let me see if I can zoom in, if I can do that. Quite hard to read. Maybe it's just my screen. But linking the opportunities to the actual research is always, it does help. Like, are they the same as there in the map? Maybe they are, maybe they are not. But even then, like, these could be very general opportunities. You could be very specific, like how do you prioritize which opportunity to go for? You also could elaborate. And then design stage, where he's basically saying from opportunities to solutions. So he did some involvement of the users, understood how the group would look like, mapped out the information architecture, different data set distribution, things of that nature. I like that he involved actual people. So, the challenge was not run in isolation. He actually kind of engaged with someone. I would be interested to know who, though. Like, who was the person, because I don't know if he captured customer segments or any personas or anything what would define who the user is. No, not really. So this is a gap I would kind of want to see exactly. Let's say who's even if it's on a high level proto persona, just for me to quickly visualize and understand how did you arrive and how did you target those people you engaged with. He did some flow diagrams, I guess, on his own, interaction design, did some flows, which he linked up, described exactly what the change was and what the benefit, I guess, for a user, which I guess it's a statement. So I would maybe rephrase these like, what is the benefit for the user, or maybe even the business, because you mentioned both in the beginning. That could help. And that's about it. So this is good case. I mean, you kind of arrived at some conclusions. One thing what I would add to this is like the next steps, your learnings. Where is this gonna, what's next for us? Would it be, let's say, would you suggest Vodafone to do something about it? Would it impact their strategy anyhow? You can draw a lot of different storytelling based conclusions so that it doesn't just trail off. And in the end, you could also add a call to action saying, hey, would you like to find out more? Hit me up, or something like that, just leaving an email. So you add a bit more call to action, especially as it's part of your portfolio. But otherwise, it's a really interesting take. And I like that, he did it like properly. He tried to actually go and break it down, break it apart, and try to actually see exactly what could be done with that case. And I see a question from JP, and he's saying, so was this all his own audit, or were there any interviews, qual feedback, quotes would be powerful? Exactly. This is, so it seems like it's a bit of a mix, if I'm correct. I might be totally wrong. Maybe it's another thing to consider, that a lot of people, when they make their portfolios, they display things which they think look good, which other peers might be impressed, but hiring managers are going to be like, do you actually talk to the users? Make it clear, basically. Did you not? Be honest, things of that nature. It's totally fine if you haven't, but state exactly why you haven't done so. And here, as you can see, he did. and he set up open card sorting session with a number of users. Maybe it's just specificity is what's missing. But other than that, it's a great case study, especially for the challenge like that. You can continue working with it as well. It's not just like a baked and done, in kind of like that way. Cool. So that's Luca. Massive applause to Luca. Thanks so much for participating. I might also do deep dives. So, some of the people who submitted, do let me know if you want me to break it down and maybe, kind of like a grill on specific details and give you more feedback. But it also, if you combine all the feedback I'm going to give every single participant, you even can end up with a big pool of things you can inform your other decisions in the future. All right, let's go into the next one. And by the way, I'm going through the participants, and I'm going to try to kind of do maybe 10 minutes. I'm already overreaching with that, but I'm gonna try to do maybe 10 minutes per participant without waffling too much. So I'm limiting myself as much as I can. If someone could time keep it in the chat, do let me know, shout out if I should be quicker or slower. Anyhow, the next one is by Nathan. And Nathan, I think, if I'm correct, I reviewed his portfolio back in the day. So it's really good to see that people who participate before actually participate again and engage with the community, with myself. It's just good to see. So Nathan, he went ahead and just did it in Notion, which is quite interesting method to do case studies or document your process or things of that nature. And he's saying redesigning Vodafone's cancellation experience to promote a pleasant and constructive offboarding process for both the customers and the business. That's quite clear. Designing service cancellation. This, however, could be a bit tweaked or focus a bit more on the experience itself. However, of course, I might be wrong because maybe he's very specific there, just design a redesign. So project length, he did 2 weeks. UI UX design. This is a bit of a contention between UI and UX. I would be careful. I would maybe be a bit more specific in responsibilities or the steps you took. Ultimately, if it's a conceptual case, which is advice to any other person, is kind of like consider if you could just state that you took these steps to deliver this experience instead of just marking yourself or labeling as a UI UX designer. That could kind of trip you. And then too long didn't read. This is what I loved actually, because it's a summary. Ultimately, like this type of approach is very, I guess, unusual from hiring manager perspective, because I tend to view these endless scrolls of case studies, but sometimes they're very too small, but this is kind of in between. So Nathan was quite conscientious to trying to describe it and introduce and summarize it before giving the meat, all that depth basically. So too long didn't read overview. How might we design an online cancellation process that helps retain customers but also provides an optimal experience for those who chose to cancel. So he went into problems like low discoverability, solutions. So it's basically maybe linking this a bit more visually would help. It's always good to kind of draw, okay, this is the issue on side of it, like let's say left to right, there's a solution, kind of just helping me to connect the dots so I don't have to jump back and forth and seeing if you actually answer every issue or the right issue with the right solutions. He did some research, so he zoomed out on a big picture. So he went into the data, which some of it I provided. He obviously did a little bit more investigation, define exactly what touch points like virtual assistant, Toby, and I keep forgetting, but I realized that you cannot really see my cursor. So yeah, you have to maybe just follow my voice and try to actually connect what I'm looking at. If anyone knows how to show the cursor on the screen on a live feed on YouTube, do let me know. I just can't figure it out. Anyhow, Vodafone is capitalizing on a new technology, so he's basically stating exactly what we're trying to do, which are all the great technical benefits, which, it's a marketing spiel to attract the new customers, but does it enable you to retain others? You would have to think about like all the ways to upgrade people, how to incentivize it for them to care about it. And also he's highlighting, let's say, the pandemic issues like COVID-19, and that it makes people more online than ever. Spot on. And he gives some interesting metrics here as well, like the 78% year on year since the lockdown. All of these statements, if you take it from some sort of secondary research, it's always a good idea to kind of be like very specific and say, this is where I borrowed it from. You could like leave a footnote or leave a link to a specific case study article, whatever you used. That would then, complete it, because otherwise it might look like the statements like from your personal kind of like, oh, this is what I think it is. But if you can back it up and add some evidence, that adds so much more weight to your statements. Well, why do people cancel? So he went and checked the star rating, which is glowing, 1.5 out of 5 stars. Amazing. Over 10,000 online reviews, again stating where exactly it is. That would be really good. And he kind of extracted poor broadband connection speed. One reason why I canceled it as well. Lengthy and unhelpful customer service call. Another reason, but not for calls. Poor company to customer communication. Spot on. And he also put it like anecdotal evidence, which is awesome to see. So he highlights exactly what the issues are and just showcasing in examples. It's awesome. I mean, given what he had to work with, like a secondary research, it's great. And then issues of a current experience, so no clear route, things of that nature. He kind of remapped, I guess, rethought with additional information of what's the issue. I would make it glow a bit more, so like frustration from being forced to pay cancellation fees. Make it red, like clearly state that this is an issue. Otherwise, it's kind of like a black and white. It doesn't look like, it doesn't have severity visually, right? So let's UX the UX and kind of make the message much more powerful. Synthesis of the findings, created a proto persona, and then went to how might we's. And now it's kind of like if anyone can make a sound of brake pedal jamming on it. This is very quick. Like, like the momentum of it just developed, it kind of escalated very quick. So I would be wondering, like, what other segments did you consider? How did you think that this is a persona to target? Like all of that, like to synthesize my findings, show me how exactly. Like, did you take, like, was it all that secondary research feedback? Was it myself as someone who gave you a brief and you were like, oh, this is just a millennial, so I'm gonna put like 28 years old, yada yada yada, show me exactly how did you arrive at that Emma, and also show me who you don't want to target. So if you can outline and say, these are the typical customers, if their behaviors or whatever, factors you would choose to use, and then you picked one, and then you went for Emma, be much more specific. And I see some comments. Adam, how did I miss this live stream? You're just on time. It's second case out of 7, so you're good, buddy. And then he went into ideation, like how might we? I like that what he did, and I have some notes, by the way. It's not like I'm just making this stuff up on a go, but I like that he framed it positively. So like, how do we provide, help, foster, improve everything about Emma? And then he went into prototypes, tried to actually ideate and kind of outline that. What could have helped? Because I saw these prototypes, they're really cool, and they're, the usability of them are top notch, and I like the high fidelity of it, and all of it makes sense. But I would like to see the information architecture of it, like what other case had, let's say, was more information architecture of the actual sitemaps, flows, things of that nature, so I can prepare for it, because otherwise I'm here looking at a demo and I'm like, okay, take me to the end. But I could just kind of prepare, like warm it up a little bit of like the bones and then show the detail, if that makes sense. And so he went through all these prototypes. I'm gonna skip through because otherwise we're gonna be stuck. Oh, quite slow on my machine. And then he went, oh, it jumps. Okay, I think we're good. So when he went into the user testing, all right, my machine is very unresponsive. Okay, I just need to slowly scroll. Okay, so the prototypes are breaking it. Anyhow, So user testing. So he tested it to 3 participants, I guess. And what did they respond it with? I would maybe expand on this, and I would, as a hiring manager, just to think out loud, I would be like, you know, was it Emma's? What did you find 4 Emma's? And if so, what factors did you recruit them from? Like, how did you get to those 4 people? Why is it 4 people? Who did you consider? Why did you consider recruiting? Things of that nature. I would care a lot, because even if it's a challenge and maybe conceptual case and, you know, something you did, you know, in 2 weeks, I would be interested to see exactly, you know, like, how did you make the decision ultimately? How did you connect it? So you could make it a bit more clear and explicit. Is it Emma's, basically? And measuring success. This is really, really good. This is what I would want to see in the intro, in the, you know, after that, maybe secondary research, or maybe, you know, like somewhere in the beginning, saying this is what the success looks like. This is the measures we care about. And this is, after all that research, I did all those prototypes, and this is what I want to measure in the user testing, or the successful adoption or a failed adoption. All of these things, you know, the measures of success should be kind of like one of the introductory points, so you kind of brief me. You get me on board of exactly what are you trying to achieve. And we have quite a few people coming in. Hey, Camille, no worries for being late. Is it common to make case studies in Notion? It's more and more common. I reviewed 1 case study in Notion. And we have 2 participants in this challenge in Notion. So yeah, I guess, you know, the numbers are stacking up. Anyhow, so Nathan also describes the next steps, the final screens, and the retrospective of exactly what he learned as a person, which is great. What's missing? Chat, what is missing? What's the last thing he should add, given that he added the next steps and things of that nature? Can anyone just shout out? Anyone? There might be a delay, but if anyone knows what could make the ending of this case study better, let everybody know. Just chip in. And meanwhile, I see that JP is saying that for UX heavy roles, Notion seems more sufficient. Someone got a friend call that to join this live stream. You have a good friend. Cool. All right. Well, if nobody wants to make this call, that's totally fine. What's missing in this ending is a call to action. Ultimately, you know, it's, or I see JP says results of user testing iterations. That too. You know, it's almost like before that you could have those kind of ending bits, the test results. I see that Chafura, if I'm correctly pronouncing test results, yeah, you could do that too. I think he highlighted some of that, like kind of hinted at it, that this is a final mockups and so forth. But the next bit is a call to action or more case studies. As a hiring manager, because that's why you're doing case studies, to get the job, right? I would be like, okay, like, can I contact you? Let's say if I'm very incentivized to now connect with you, just make it easy for the hiring managers. Add like a big button or saying, hey, do you want to find out more? Email me or call me, yada, yada, yada. Things of that nature. And then, of course, all the different bits you called out in the chat is spot on as well about the summarizing and test results. All right, let's jump into the next one. Because we have quite a few. Let me just close down the old ones. Boom. All right. So this one is in Figma, as you can see. We're going to have quite a few different channels to review. And let me just take a hand tool. So this one is interesting because it's a different angle. How do I... haven't used Figma in so long. How do I close down the tabs, the sidebars? I'm total noob. This is something which I cannot cut out of a live stream. Unfortunately, command plus. Right, let me try that. No, doesn't work. Maybe it's because it's a command and I. All right. Anyhow, let's just do it. You know, like I'm a noob and so is some other people in the chat. That's okay. I think it's because it's in a browser that could be limiting us, or maybe the OBS, the software I used to live feed. Oh, okay. All right. We figured it out. It's command plus dot. Awesome. All right, everybody, we are there. We made it. Anyhow, so this is gonna be interesting. It's a bit different take on it. I see some feedback because it's not Acture. Hell yeah, it's not Acture. It's a good tool, but definitely can't beat Acture. All right, so let's crack on. So this participant, and it's Deepa Ghosh, if I'm pronouncing the name, I'm not really sure if I'm pronouncing it right, but basically they started with outlining those metrics and, you know, different bits about Vodafone as a business, which is great. And then we dove into the challenge saying, how can we help retain customers? So we had this how might we line. I would maybe paraphrase this with how might we's. And the business model is something interesting which very rarely see actually in case studies, but what they decided to do is really just go through key partners, activities, resources, cost structure, value proposition, revenue streams, relationship with a customer segments, kind of have a very structured approach to capture as much as they can about specific subject before diving into solutionizing, which is great. You know, it's not something typical, but designers need to think about business a lot as well and should bring it, especially as a starting point. And then another framework, which is atypical as well, because it's quite rare to see this, but user-centered design canvas is another thing, which I haven't seen in quite some time. I think I seen it like a few years ago in one of the applicants. But this is kind of like provided them with an ability to check the problems, the motives, the business, the users, the fears, unique value proposition, alternatives, competitive advantages, solutions, X, Y, Z. But with this, I think, you know, you could use it as a starting point just to see exactly where the gaps are. But I would use it more so when you can actually do all those different explorations and discoveries with the UX methods, so that you can actually pre-fill it with the actuals instead of like presumed things. One thing what I had like as a big question mark, and I see that there is a note as well which I might have missed. Oh yeah, this is a note I saw before, but basically what we're saying is that we couldn't conduct proper primary research, and so we did secondary research trying to investigate online, let's say, which is fair, and I like the honesty of that, because you might not have the direct access to the users. Based off of that, of a secondary research, we came up with a persona. But as with Nathan's example, I would be like, well, how did you figure out that this Alex Maddock is the right person? Is it again because I'm a millennial and you're like, oh, this is another millennial and, you know, sort of fitting it? Is it from the online secondary research? If so, show me. Just kind of don't leave that gap. Or maybe I might overthinking as a hiring manager. Now I'm expecting, oh, this is a case study. Maybe it's not yet a case study, which is fair. But if you do a case study with this material, make sure to tell a story so I know how did you arrive to this specific persona. And who are you excluding? Even as important as that. Like, who else are you excluding? Why did you pick and focus on this specific character, right? And what I liked a lot about this submission is this. And just representation itself. I mean, it's a small thing, but as a hiring manager, I love seeing when, you know, people think about the presentation of information as much as just like the raw outputs, which again, other, you know, cases which I'm going to show are complete opposite, but they're also really, really good. But anyways, for this specific case, we also mapped out this bit. of course, how accurate this is a big question mark, because if you don't engage with a user, if you don't follow your, secondary research or online explorations, whatever you did with deeper insights, you're never going to be able to say that they were anxious or why they were anxious. It's almost like a guess, a presumption. So maybe you could follow through and add more detail eventually. That's also a way to go. You could also get more insights that way. Another bit is that I noticed that there's a lot of opportunities in this map. And some of them are quiet, almost like I guess something you would use in how might we's maybe. So like better customer service and support, it could take so many different ways to solve it. Is it better chatbots? Is it just, a better fraud service design? Is it customer experience improvements and marketing things of sorts? So like you might want to break it down into smaller pieces going forward, and then how might we exactly to understand what it is. It's just one way to skin the cat. Then they did some sort of flow, exactly what the flow would be like from user perspective. I would follow this up with I guess a bit more specific structure of the information, exactly how you would inform those different low fidelity mockups they did. But I like that we also, one of the things which we highlighted was like, hey, I didn't just have enough time, which is totally fair. How far you got, it's exactly, it's up to you, because we all deal with our challenges in life. And so they kind of outline exactly what the user could be doing, exactly where they could be going. So that's basically login process, the two-factor authentication of sorts. Then they landed on that page basically, and that's where the account settings are. I guess that would lead to the cancellation, temporary disabling, permanent cancellation, things of that nature. But this is an example of how they took one of the ideas from the opportunities and just took off. So I would kind of like challenge you, try to also prioritize it a little bit, because some of other bits are as important or could be even more important to other people of how to do so, or to the business itself, or to you as a designer. You could make your solutions much more tailored and rightful if you can first kind of cover holistically and then say, okay, what can I do now, what could I do tomorrow, what could we do in the future, so you can prioritize it. Cool. Let me just take a sip. I'm rambling now. If you have any questions, again, leave them down in the chat, in the comments, or any observations, feedback, suggestions, you name it. That would be helpful for the people who submitted as well, I'm pretty damn sure. Cool. And the next one is by one of the people in the Discord community, Demeter. And Demeter basically went off and created a Behance case study. So kind of got kind of that commitment right, and I think he committed to 1 month, if I'm correct. Yeah, he did it. So he basically was like, well, I might as well use this challenge to make a case study, because it's one of those kind of like a side project ideas you could carry on and just develop something out of that. A concept aimed at improving Vodafone's customer service experience, which is cool. I wonder if you need to state if it's a concept. You could just say something like improving Vodafone's customer service experiences or something like that. You could add a tag saying it's a conceptual case, just somewhere small. You don't have to make one of the key points of this case study. It doesn't really matter. Ultimately, it's your approach, it's the evidence, it's things you can carry on and kind of tell a story with later on. And I see some comments as well. I like how CJM is related to a persona. Sometimes people just do the persona for the sake of doing persona. I agree. You better have a good reason to do anything in UX, to be honest, because if you're just gonna pepper a lot of methods and deliverables, you're definitely not gonna go ahead, because that's just gonna highlight a lot of gaps and issues. And as a hiring manager, I might be like, oh, this person has potential, But then in the interview, I'm gonna be like, well, why did you do this persona in that way? Why did you jump immediately? What happened in between those two deliverables in your case study? What activities you took? So you better have a prepared answer if you don't make and clearly show a story in your case studies. How can I set perfect persona for the project? Very short answer. I mean, it deserves probably its own video, but very short answer is do your research first and understand who the customer is, and then decide with your team who you're targeting, and then outline that. It's as simple as that. From your perspective, what kind of information structure or case study you prefer the most? I'm gonna show you. So I saw this Demeter's case, and this is spot on. He, of course, one thing to note that he's showing the final product here as well, but ultimately the story has to have three parts. There has, well, this I guess reflects more of a outline of the UX process, but every story, every case study has to be built on a story where you have the introduction and the development, you have some sort of climax, and then you have the resolution and then basically that's three different acts to every story. You need to take that as a framework, but also consider that in each project we're always going to have a challenge, the approach, and the solution. And so if you can merge and overlap those two, you can tell a really good story, and that would be a very high level structure to tell to make a good case study. And Demeter here, before I jump back into the questions, there's a lot. He's basically outlined the problem, which is the customer problem, what customers complain, and then also the challenge from business side, which is retain Vodafone's customer from contract cancellation. But ultimately, these two are almost like problem and challenge. They're like, potato. Like what I would do, I would just make one statement, or maybe make two statements and say, this is the challenge, and that's about it. You have a business goal, you have a customer needs or unfulfilled customer needs, and that's your challenge basically. How are you going to answer a business need and also consider the customer needs? And then the second point should be just your approach. So like say, hey, I just did this exploration of user-centered approach, and I developed it and I added the detail, and that's why we have the third thing, which is a solution, and describe a solution. So that would kind of outline a very high level framework. And to be entirely honest, the more senior you're gonna get, the more succinct your case studies are gonna have to be, right? So that 1 to 3 approach kind of works well, because that summary of some illustrations could be just one slide you're going to use in the future as a senior, let's say, or as a lead or a manager or head of, because that's what exactly, the hiring managers would care. It's the story you tell and the things you're going to say in the interview are going to matter more. But as a, let's say, junior or senior or midweight, you might as well expand into the detail. Any other questions? How can I set persona? That we answered. From your perspective, what kind of information? Okay, we answered that too. How can we join with this community? If you mean the Discord community, I'm gonna leave the link after the actual feed, after live stream. I'm gonna leave it in the chat so you can just click on it and join. The link is gonna expire, by the way, but just do remind me in the end of the stream. I'm just going to link it up and you can join the Discord community. Just make sure to introduce yourself and chat up a little bit. Do hiring managers truly go through the rich, detailed contents as deeply as you're going through it? I'm not going through it deeply. I'm literally scanning. So I might have 2 minutes, but like ultimately it's gonna be like this. So like if I would open Demeter's case study, and sorry Demeter to make you an example, but I hope you're gonna be fine by that. If I'm a hiring manager right now, right, and I have 20 different candidates to review, and I have 30 minutes lunchtime, at best, or I'm doing it after my work day because I have so much other things to do, I'm gonna be like, okay, let's see for red flags. So I'm gonna scan through it really quickly, go through exactly what you did, like literally spend a minute going through it, seeing exactly if anything stands out from a deliverable perspective, but then go back and then try to read more into it to see what sort of story are you telling, and then see exactly where the gaps are. as I go through it, I either gonna lean, you know, on one side of the spectrum towards kind of like a no, or kind of like, yeah, the person has potential and I want to talk to them. So it really depends on like how well can you capture my attention. So for example, in Demeter's case, he outlined Vodafone purpose, things of that nature. Here he was quite excessive of it, but that's fair enough. It's his story, it's his case study. If he feels like this is necessary, I'm gonna go on a journey. And as you can see, he added these cheap points like let's dig a bit deeper. That kind of pulls me down to see exactly what's next. So he knows how to guide the users or the users of his case studies like myself. And so he basically described why people choose the Vodafone. I think he adds a little bit too much detail, to be honest, for me, but I also consider that this is a challenge review, a project which he did as a ultimately something which would feed into the case study, right? So we also need to be fair here. But he does these like little bits saying, hey, let's dig a bit deeper. He outlined the Vodafone customers in UK says, things, feels, does. So this is empathy map and pretty good use of it. But I would be questioning exactly how many immediately, like my thinking, if I unpack this. So who did you talk to come up with this? Who did you talk to come up with this? Is it deep enough? And as you can see, immediately he says information gathered from Google search, Reddit, reviews, yada, yada, yada. I would be very specific exactly what sort of information he got. Is it quant? Is it qual? Attitudes, behaviors? What did you capture from each of these? And then kind of make a decision. And then he, of course, summarizes the issues and things of that nature. But ultimately, this would be my thinking. It's kind of like you go through and you see what are the red flags. And maybe I'm going to make a video just, you know, telling you what the red flags are or what contributes to the potential to get people in. But you should get by now exactly what I'm talking about. Then, you know, I'm never going to spend more than, let's say, 2 to 3 to 5 minutes per person, per applicant, because I can't. It's just impossible. And so it's for you to tell the best story you can in the least amount of time. But of course, as let's say, if you take a book, how long should be a book, right, to captivate the user? Well, you could have a coffee table book, or you could have a book like freaking Harry Potter or whatever, you know, whatever you like, which is gonna have tomes of books. A book is as long as it needs to be to tell a good story, but what matters most is you telling a good story first and foremost. Right, I see that there is a chat going on. There's quite a few different bits. I'm sorry if I'm gonna miss any of them or miss the addressing of that. Anyway, so summary of the issues. This is one thing which I kind of noticed. What he did is kind of outline the proxy, which is the Telenor, and I think this is in his area like a key, I guess, like a proxy competitor of the Vodafone, and he tried to kind of, I guess, get more skin in the game that way, just kind of observe it through the proxy. I don't know if that's the right way to do so, though. I think it gives you more insight to kind of solutionize or find issues for Telenor, but not so much for Vodafone. Even if you compare it side by side, there could be cultural differences, behavioral differences, there could be attitudes, all the different bits which makes customers in UK choose Vodafone, or in Telenor everywhere else in, let's say, Europe, would be quite different. Because different people deal with different issues in their lives. The context does matter, and who you target also matters here a lot. So I would advise Demeter not to bin this case or not to kind of like remake it, but also think maybe it would make sense to just go and see what Telenor does and improve Telenor's customer experience, because you have the biggest access to it, given that it's your side project, the passion project. So you could kind of go and do justice there instead of trying to collate two different things like Telenor's experience and also Vodafone's. And then customer interview, Telenor Bulgaria. So yeah, it's European market. So you kind of interviewed someone from Telenor, and you list the questions. I wouldn't really care much about the questions. I would care what hypotheses are you trying to prove or disprove. And your hypothesis could be literally a line or a post-it note saying that this is what I'm after. And then the results, of course, which you kind of mapped it out. But then again, it's like, is this what you're trying to see if they're on the same play field, you know, between Vodafone and Telenor or not? It's a big question, which I would be like, don't know. We could have a chat, but I would be also quite worried. So have a consideration if it's, if you could just pivot it and do the Telenor instead of Vodafone, and then, go deeper into it. Since you obviously have access to some users, again, would consider who are those people you kind of approached, basically, what the segmentation was like, how did you plan it out, is there any personas of that, and things of that nature. I also noticed that he extracted some of like a vision or strategy from actual senior UX manager at Vodafone, kind of like a takeaway of what they're trying to do. It's interesting take. It's one of those things which you might maybe want to include almost like an ending point. I'm not sure how to tell a story better, or maybe start with this, saying that, hey, this is the issue, this is a problem, and this is what Vodafone UXers are trying to do, but they're not doing this right. So that's why they should listen to what I have to say next, let's say, if that makes sense. And you went into a UX strategy as well, trying to kind of map it out, define the approach, which is, it's up to you if you want to use this tool to say that. You then went into a persona, and this is where I think it's a lot here. So you might need to think of how you can guide me through this story to tell a little bit better story, basically. How does that connect easier? And if it's necessary as well, or if, I guess, maybe the fragments match, and if we kind of scale one by one, because it could make in your head, but as you can see, I literally spent 5 minutes looking before. Now I'm trying to explain my thinking, and so, it might make sense to you, but maybe hiring manager might be like, maybe it's a bit too much of information, or is it in the right spot ultimately? When you define some personas, 2 of them, and I'm not gonna go into depth, but I like the simplicity of it. The simpler the things are, the easier it is to, to apply, as long as they are rightful. But I would question if, like, how did you arrive into those personas? What are the key difference? Because, I mean, the easiest way for me to understand would be if you say persona 1, I don't know, a person who always cancels their broadband providers. And I'm just, making this crap up. The next person is someone who's reluctant and never cancels. Maybe it's behavior or attitude-based personas. But explain this to me. Explain who did you not want to target, like in other cases, and who did you want to target in this case. Then you jumped into ideation. So you wanted to actually see exactly how you could do that. Several different ideas. Then user flows, happy paths, and unhappy paths. That's great. I like that. Insights, and I'm not going to go into it deep, but I'm going to come back to one point, by the way. Storyboards. I like your storyboards because you kind of define the unhappy path and happy path for it. I don't know if this is the right placement. Maybe you could have placed it ahead of it, because here in a storyboard you have quite a few different touch points and how the user would arrive even into this, or what they would do, with this, basically, as a customer experience. So I wonder, how does that tie in well with every other development you have in your case study? And then user journey, which is, I would presume this is the new one. But then I would question, why didn't you map out the existing one? Because journey mapping and experience mapping is really powerful tool, but it's more powerful if you use it to define what there is right now instead of what there could be. Like what there could be is almost like a layer you could add eventually and say this is before and after. But as is much more important to map out. So I would even consider that the storyboards is that like the to be, and then you can be specific with a user journey map, but also have a version to define exactly what is there. And I guess you did it for Telenor as a proxy again. And you wireframed, designed it, and I'm not gonna go into it. I can see that there is, visually appealing, that's pretty good, Vodafone on brand and everything else. You have a prototypes as well, which is great. And then your learnings. Thank you. Cool. So there are a few things here. One big thing here is that, the user testing, for example, things which we highlighted together with viewers here on Livestream in another case was the summary of testing, testing this out if it works, doing the amends, showcasing exactly how you iterated, and things of that nature. And so you could kind of like add a bit more to it, like what's next ultimately. What could you do more to it? I see that you did a lot of learnings here, and kind of like asking yourself a question of connecting with a strategy, with a philosophy of actual organization. So there's a lot of messages. Think exactly how you can make it flow a little bit better, maybe. Like, for example, you could start with a business and outline all the strategic bits, and you know, that Vodafone management of their UX and their vision and things of that nature, but say, hey, they fall short and this is the challenge because the customers are saying this and this and that and they're not happy. Therefore, we need to redesign something and do something about it. And that's how you get into UX. And that's how you solve the challenge. And that's how you prove or disprove that it works or doesn't work. And that could be your story ultimately, if that makes sense. And there's a few things to catch up on the chat. I might not address again every single one of them. Does anyone know if any tool for storyboards? I think it's pen and paper would be best. There's of course a lot of tools, like I think I'm blanking on a name. It's called, I think, Open Peeps, which you can just have people and devices and things of that nature you can arrange. UX testing. Can you make a lecture on it? I might make a video in the future. Might as well, and then other bits. Cool. All right, let's proceed. One thing what I want to highlight here before we break for a few minutes, so you can actually have a break and get a brew or something, take a sip, relax a little bit. I want to make a very quick lecture on UX item prioritization, or how might we prioritization. And this is because I realized, looking at all the case studies, that people jump to the immediate ideas without thinking if it's worth doing it. Or jumping into kind of like a one idea immediately and you know, doing it ahead. So let me really quickly use maybe my board and follow this as well if you can. But ultimately, you know, when you do, let's say, your how might we's, and it's so common right now that everybody's doing it, which is a bit of a pet peeve. But if you do your how might we's, you're gonna end up with, like, let's say you have a question, right? Or you have a framed positive outcome, like how might we, I don't know, better the customer experience for Vodafone customers and yada yada yada, right? You're gonna end up with literally hundreds of ideas, or you should end up with a lot of ideas. They all should be sound, but if your team, let's say in a project setting, you're gonna end up with a ton of different ways to solve that, and you should, because why wouldn't you? Now, let's say these are all your ideas for that specific outcome you seek, right? You could have a measuring framework, you could have a basing, you could base it on something, but you're gonna end up with so many different bits, which could be rightful, could not be rightful. So what do you do? Like, a lot of people might, and a lot of designers, you know, like might just take one which is digital, because that's what we know, and maybe this is the UI, you know, like, oh, like redesigning mobile app or stuff like that. That's easy because we have the skills. However, you need to think about that maybe it's not the right thing to do, even if it's easy. So what I would recommend you to do is to start prioritizing it ultimately. So if you think about it, you're always going to have some sort of future state, something which you don't achieve easily. You're always going to have the ideal state, something you want to achieve in, let's say, 1 year or so. And then you're going to have something like the MVP, or minimal viable product. This would provide you with an ability to quickly prioritize your things. And of course, this is high level. You're going to need to think about the factors you would consider trying to prioritize them. But what I would just do, let's say, future would be something which you cannot yet achieve, but you need to base your decisions so that the customer experience can improve over time. And it could be something you can achieve in 2 to 3 years, let's say. Rough. This is up to you to decide again what it is. Ideal could be 12 months, right? MVP could be something you could do in, let's say, the next 3 to 6 months, which is what most of the projects in UX might look like in agile development and things of that nature. And again, ballparks, rough estimates, yada yada. So now, taking all those how might we's, where would it end up? You could have some sort of feasibility, like is it technically possible? You could have a brainstorming session with a team and just put them out based on desirability from the users, maybe viability, what does that mean? But ultimately, you should kind of bunch those different ideas and try to exactly prioritize what could you do immediately and what could you do later on. And I can guarantee that, you know, the apps, let's say, or things of that nature would still end up in MVP because it's easy to do, but there's going to be extra things. Like, don't limit yourself just to digital touch points. Ultimately, that's the key takeaway I'm trying to tell you, is think that there could be touch points which might not even need a UI. Maybe less UI is the right UI. Maybe it's a chatbot improvement. Maybe it's some sort of desktop touch point. Perhaps it's a service design piece which doesn't really require any digital touch points. Maybe it's a marketing newsletter in a customer experience world. So you need to come up with a vast amount of things you could do and then try to see exactly what, you know, as a business, as a team, as a project squad, we should be doing. And then work it that way. And of course, this how might we's, the small bit you can achieve in the next 3 to 6 months, should tie in with the bigger ones and the bigger ones, so that your visionary pieces, like, I don't know, automated cancellation or Neuralink in your brain where you cancel the service, of course I'm talking crap, kind of like it's a baby step towards it. So you go one, bam, and you are there in the future. That's ultimately the thinking. So I would kind of challenge you to, when you ideate and you come up with ideas, to think broader, to not constrain yourself at all. Don't think about digital touchpoints. Don't think about apps, desktop. That's crap. It doesn't really matter. Think about the best customer experience, the best user experience a person could have in the future, and then work backwards. That's why people are so drunk on design thinking, design sprints, and everything in between, because it allows people to kind of just be like, you know, think out of the box, and every other business stakeholder just gets drunk on it and is like, yes, this is the best idea ever, let's do this. But when we realize that it's not really possible, and that's why you need to prioritize and say, okay, so what can we achieve for that in 12 months and then 3 months, and kind of work backwards and see exactly what's that first step you can take in order to do that. Cool. Let's take a break. Let's do some stuff. I'm gonna put some jingles. I'm gonna do some stuff. Leave a comments down below. Grab a snack. Grab a drink. I'm gonna be back, and we'll have another free case studies, another free submissions, and some takeaways from yours truly, basically. Cool. A few minutes, and we're gonna continue. Right, so we're back. I hope everybody has a good break. You caught up whatever you needed to catch up, and you got a drink, and you're ready to continue. I see the chat has been active as well. One question really quickly to answer from Camille, and he's saying, V, do your co-workers or team members watch your live stream? I don't know. Maybe. I know that some watch the videos, and I usually don't advertise that. I kind of made the channel to upskill the team back in the day on YouTube, like my team back in the day, basically years ago. But yeah, it kind of took off, and so I'm glad it's useful for some, but it's also the learning has to come from the people who need it. And so I'm very cautious that the material which might be useful for some people might not be useful for other people. So I don't kind of say, hey, go and watch this. I used to do that, by the way, and for more of a junior crowd. But anyhow, let's continue. Anyone know how to join with Design Squad Slack channel? It's Discord. You almost failed the test. It's Discord. But I'm gonna again share the link in the end of the stream, so stick around. After we're done with all the different case studies, I'm gonna share a link. It's gonna expire in a day or so, but you are gonna be able to join it basically. So stay tuned for that. Let's crack on. Do let me know if the music is loud, if you can even hear it. It should be in the background, but if we continue, this submission is by Jose from Brazil, and he's working in a banking industry. So he gave a little bit of a context who he is, where he's coming from, why is he doing. He wants to transition into UX field. And to be honest, his take is super specific and very, very quantified at that. It's a lot of material, which I, for example, think is very great if, let's say, you are planning to do a case study in a more visual format, because it's very factual. It's kind of like this, and that. And so I really enjoyed going through because it's super specific. He kind of introduced exactly what the challenge was, the brief of it. And so the best bit about his take is that every statement he makes in this outline, in this take, in this project case study, is that he... Right, I'm gonna reduce the sound a little bit. Cool. And so what his take is that every point he makes, every statement he makes, he's backing it up with a link. So like he's saying that, for example, the studies, that the service is not so satisfactory when compared to other companies, he links it. So he's stating all the evidence and every different bits. He outlines the users, where here is where I would want to see it a bit more visually. So that you are kind of like UXing it, you're making it easier for a hiring manager to kind of say, okay, this is what he's targeting, this is what he's trying to solve, who his users are ultimately. Then the goals as well, so identifying key points, canceling the service and the experience improvement, facilitating the user's access, and maintaining customers' trust. So all the different bits, but this is more like from a business perspective. Now, what I would want to also see is the user needs, which you discover, which might come later. So let's keep an eye on that. And he used the CSD matrix, which is quite uncommon. I've seen it in a few places before, but this is where he's mapping his thinking. Like, where is he coming from, where he's starting. So it's certainties, assumptions, and doubts. And he kind of mapped it out exactly what he was after. I'm not going to go too deep into it, but it's just interesting take to show exactly what did you start with. He did a lot of desk research, so he went and kind of researched a crap load of studies and articles and everything in between. Again, it's worth looking at it, so you can pause or take a screenshot if you want to look at it, but he went very, very quant heavy on this, and I like it a lot because it's almost like evens out other case studies. It's if you could kind of get all those people together, have, let's say, Jose and Nathan or whoever in one team, and they cover different bits, they kind of would arrive at such a really good outcome. It would be very interesting to see. So he basically went out, synthesized all of that and arrived at these conclusions like too much time, not so efficient, lack of integration, trends of for cancellation, things of that nature. So he's highlighting exactly what he synthesized. Again, if this would take on into the case study for UX, I would want it to kind of like tie it in exactly and say, this is the evidence behind this point, so I know exactly which of these things actually tie it in into this and how he makes those decisions. And then, interestingly, he used storyboarding to outline his experience. And this is, to me, like, you know, before I give even the feedback, the storyboard itself is really good because it quickly outlines exactly what experience is like. However, the storyboard is perfect tool to ideate and come up with new ways of doing, because you don't have to constrain yourself. You can be as high level as you want to be, and then kind of like, you know, you define the future experiences. So instead of using storyboard to outline existing experience, I would use experience maps, you know, the journey maps, customer experience map, empathy map, whatever it is, so it outlines that kind of unhappy person, as you can see here, who's frowning at his laptop. Storyboard would be best, I mean, it's ultimately it's up to you how you want to use it, but it's uncommon to use storyboard to outline as his experience. Try to use that when you ideate and brainstorm, because it's much easier to envision it when people see it. So you could switch those around and kind of like replace this or add a bit more depth to it. So, you know, you can easily make experience map out of your storyboard. You just need to add swim lanes of pain points and, you know, channels and the whys, the decision-making processes, the opportunities, you name it, whatever is most appropriate for you to communicate what it is. It's as easy as that. Hello, is this live going to be uploaded to watch later? Yes. So the live stream is gonna be, I think it takes a few minutes, but the playback is gonna be immediately available. So you can watch it at, you know, you can 2x it basically. So watch me at 2x the speed, so I sound funnier. And then he outlined the proto persona. If you watched other cases and me reviewing other cases, you're gonna understand that I'm gonna be like, again, how did you arrive at that proto persona? What was the customer segmentation like? How did you make that decision? Who did you choose not to include and why? Like, what was your thinking behind? And how are you so specific, let's say, with this? You know, there's a lot of things you could kind of like better outline, add a little bit more of a decision making of why you think it is, and I'm sure you kind of in your head it makes sense, but for the hiring manager it might not make sense because it's jumping from one deliverable to the other. So you can add a bit more clarity to this. Silly question, how would you perceive recalling to different sourcing in a case study? Just like in a diploma paper where you build up bibliography. You could do that as well, but just make it clear that you're backing it up. I think in Nathan's case study, in a second one, I hinted that you could just add a footnote, you know, but just make it like 1, 2, 3, whatever, the indented number, so it's clear that you're gonna back it up somehow. So it's not a stupid question at all, by the way. Process flow, so he outlined the process exactly how they would go through, and I'm not going to go too deep as well. And then usability testing, with the main objective is to maintain the current conditions of a company, such as website, layout, design system, XYZ. And then he chose 5 participants of the same age group and similar to the individual exemplified in the proto persona were recruited. And this is where I would be like, how similar, you know? Age group is great, but how similar, and why again did you choose that proto persona, that person to target? What was the driver there? What was your reasoning there? You did some usability tests, and then what I noticed before is that you introduce a prototype. So your prototype should probably come first, and you could just put it before the usability test so it flows better as a story. Again, just connect the dots for me. And then, as you can see, you're saying that these are all the changes. I guess it's more of anecdotal evidence, like the quotes. I wonder why companies have not yet adopted simple methods like this, XYZ. But it's also another question I had, like in Demeter's case, he was testing it by the proxy. So he was using Telenor to test it on Telenor users. Who did you choose as well? Did you find someone online to test it on? Did you source people, or were it your friends and family and things of that nature? Make it very clear. Don't try to kind of like wishy-washy, not tell the full story, because the hiring managers can tell immediately. I'm gonna be like, doesn't sound right. Like, just knowing, and it's fair enough it's a project case study. It's fair enough it's a challenge based you read on the internet. It's not the actual paid pro work yet, but you can be as honest as you can be. Other people just stated, hey, I just engaged with the people online on Reddit, and that's fair enough. This is your practice run. You can make it as deep as you want it to, or as deep as you can make it, but just be clear. And then you go through prototype flow. I noticed that you used my name, which is great. I hope I would have my first name and at Gmail, but you go through that, you cancel the service, and you added the link, request cancellation, and that basically completes the thing. So it's good little prototype, which is great. You link it as well, you did it on Figma, and then you added final notes, which is basically, I guess, what you would do with that, with cancellations tab, and why it's the right solution. But again, as with how might we in other cases, I would want you to prioritize it and tell me exactly what else could we be doing. What's next for this? How would you go about to actually implement this? What were your learnings and things of that nature? So you could add more about it. And another thing is like a call to action, so that I know what to do next with this. I don't have to just scroll up again and kind of try to sort out. This is really good. The only thing what I would advise you to do is now start putting this material into something like Miro or Figma or a PDF, PowerPoint, whatever. Try to tie it in so that the text is not too heavy, so you tell a good story so it flows throughout. Give it to people to read. This is what UX, like what bothers me so much, is that UXers forget to UX their UX portfolios, or UXers forget to UX their lives. They're like, oh, I'm dealing with my personal issue and I don't know what to do. And I'm like, UX it. Like, you know what to do. You can solve other people's problems. Why can't you solve your own? Just, get to it. And so I would advise you to go apply that meta layer of UX. User test your UX portfolio. Give it to someone more senior, to read. Like, let's say like you just did, you submitted for me to read, and I'm giving you specific pointers what you could do to improve it. Do that. Kind of like, get some feedback. Ultimately, that's how you're going to be sure that you're on a good track. It's as simple as that. So that's cool. Awesome submission from Jose. Let me address a few questions. You're just piling in. Okay, I see that there's conversations. I don't know which one to answer. In a case study, what is one area we should not skip detail on? User research. About usability, and I'm going to keep it that short, by the way. About usability testing, I've recently spoke to one of my colleagues who does UX in our company, and he told me that they always let somebody else do the usability testing of a prototype they created. Well, I mean, are they trained in it? And it could be very political, by the way, but I would be like, ultimately, who's making that decision? Who's the highest paid person? Like, there could be very deep politics. Ultimately, you don't want to burn bridges. You want to create them. So you might offer saying, hey, this is what we do as UX team, and these are the methods we are using. Give them the tools. Maybe it's as simple as training them up. If you are bound to it and you're cornered and you know that you cannot change it because it's someone making the decision in the business and they're not inclined, you could go a lot of different ways to influence it and change their minds. You could fight it, but it also another way is just to connect with them and say, well, maybe you need to make it deeper. Can you participate in those user testing efforts? And then take it on as you go. These things take a crap load of time to influence. It's not just gonna be like bam and it's done, unless the leadership changes, because things like that are influenced from a leadership level. So a lot of ways to skin the cat again, and I don't know a lot about it. And you added about the biases that other designer is not. So I guess it's a designer testing. Okay, so it makes a bit more sense. It's not as political then, but well, I guess both, it doesn't matter who does it. but all the people should have some training in kind of detaching themselves from their cognitive biases. You cannot skip them. You're always going to have them. So it's always have to, that's why you do, let's say in user research, peer reviews. It's exactly for that reason, so you can actually see what sticks, what doesn't stick, and you're not as influenced by it. So it does make sense to include other people, but you also, you should be driven by the hypotheses, which makes sense to your teammates, to other people. You have your goals, you have your customer or user. Ultimately, you need to empathize with them and then skip your own biases, things of that nature. But it's super hard to do in a short answer. I might go deeper into it in like a video or so, eventually. And how do we smoothly move from journey map to wireframes? Do you think mind map or flowchart is a good way of doing it? So this is where I would think that you are doing it in isolation and on your own. In reality, in proper UX scenarios, you would have some sort of team you are working on, and you should share those insights. So if you make a journey map, chances are you're gonna need to show it to someone like your product manager or development team or business stakeholders or other designers or researchers, and say, this is what I think we're doing, this is where opportunities are. So it would flow much more naturally as a process, because you would need to do workshops, ideations, and based on those ideations and the prioritizations to follow, you would then do some sort of wireframing. So there's a lot of steps involved between the two, and that's what you might skip if you're just doing on your own. But try to, if you are just learning, try to simulate those scenarios as well. Must are the most important features that must be contained in a portfolio. I guess, what are the most important features that must... That's I guess it's, a case study or a few, a link to contact you. That's about it. It's as simple as that. You don't need anything fancy, funky. Your case study should do that work. You don't need to kind of like do crazy stuff. UX is not about that. UX is about meaning and finding the right fit, and engaging with the users and answering their needs truthfully as should be. Cool. All right, let me jump into the next one. We have two more, so bear with me. I know we're like 1 hour 30 in. I think we're gonna be close to 2 hours. Thanks for everyone sticking around, by the way. It's super exciting for me to review these things, but I hope it's also benefiting you in any way, shape or form. This one, by the way, is on Miro. So we went through so many different methods. And this was submitted by Vanessa. So she wrote a little letter here. She chose to target Fido or Fido, I don't know how to pronounce that, but it's a Canada-based telecom provider. And she basically used the material I gave, or kind of outlined who will you target, what matters to them, the discovery, ideation, definition, things of that nature, steps and activities like examples. She did some secondary research outlining exactly the competitive market. What do millennials say? Or because Fido or Fido is targeting millennials, like what's good about it, good boy, bad boy. And as I can see, they have dogs as a mascots, which is cool. And then she highlights exactly what the issues were. So it's very cheap. The penalty for lying, I guess, of how much data you use, recommendations not adapted to the actual usage, things of that nature. And I'm not going to go too much into deep, but she basically unpacks it. And she also did some immediately interviews. And this is, to me, it's kind of like, it's not a case study, it's a process. This is how the Miro board would look like if you do UX and you try to kind of just like put as much information as you can in the discovery so you can inform your design decisions eventually. I had a few questions, of course, and I have a few feedback notes, or at least how I think as a hiring manager, like what else could she be doing. But basically she engaged with one person, Peter. He's a customer, 15 years old. He had a bad experience during the service cancellation and even felt guilty about it, which is like, ooh, that's a human element, a factor. Interesting. She did some empathy mapping, which is great. So it's kind of like a very high level way to map out, the experience. What is experience like for a user without making it linear. She did some insights, quote mapping, and I'm not going to go deep into it. And then she also outlines initially perceived segment of ages 20 or 30s, like existing customers, new customers, other customers provided, about goals, challenges, things of that nature. And this is all based on the experience templates. Cool. And then she also outlined the sales tactics and kind of, I guess, reflected on the business itself. So about elderly people and unethical management of that. So it's almost like a brain dump of different things, and doing some research, doing some mapping and things of that nature. But what would unite it all? Before I jump straight into the exploration of evaluating the actual UI and the flows, what would unite it all? And it would be really the customer base, because you outlined your perceived segment of millennials, which I guess you drawn out of those secondary research bits. I bet you did some interviews with pre-millennials, or whatever that generation is called now. I don't know, I'm too old. And you also did some secondary research on other segments. So I would just map those out and frame all these different bits on that scale and say, well, this is where the biggest opportunity is, kind of being a bit more strategic and holistic. Let's say if, I don't know, the cancellation is too difficult for your elderly people, maybe that's the first thing you could target, or you could target a lot of different things and make personas, basically, which I think maybe you have thought about as well anyways, but just kind of synthesizing it a little bit into a bit more cohesive bit. And then you also observation outline, you did some estimations of how they went through. I think maybe you did it yourself, or maybe it was Peter, one of your users you engaged with, the customer, the actual customer. So you observed and you quantified the specific bits. And just to quickly walk through for other people, she did basically specific timestamps for each of those different methods and touch points. And as you can see, she mapped it out. She mapped out as well the issues. So immediate feedback would be, make those freaking issues glaring, like bam, this is the issue. If you would, let's say, play this back to some sort of product manager or a person you work with, add severity to it. If this is confusing, tell how, but just make it bloody red ultimately. So it's obviously, this is where the heat is, the thing to improve on. But I like that you added the feedback timestamps ultimately. And you know why? Because that to me immediately links to some sort of measures. If you did this, what you had in mind, I guess, from the brief itself, is that to reduce the time in the research, right? To find a ways to reduce the time. And so you could also outline in the beginning the measures. So let's say if this is your goal, if this is what you're after, just make it very, very clear. Let's say in your case study, when eventually when you're going to come up with it and pull it together, just make it very, very clear about that. Anyways, this is really good stuff, and I would challenge you to go even more. Go forward, try to add to this, because this can become very, very strong case study, especially in your region, in your local market, because you are addressing your own issues with actual local people and engaging with them, and this name obviously is kind of like I would bet, household name in Canada, right? So it's much easier for you to then get into the job market if you have a case study which addresses that, because people are going to know about it. It's going to resonate much more. So keep working at it and keep hammering it, because this is really, really good start, and you could do so much of it basically to advance it. Cool. What everybody thinks. Before I carry on with that, can you please share the case study or any other case study template? I have a big issue with case study templates. I was actually making one in Figma where you could just pull different deliverables in and tell a story, but I also realized that it's very unfair to do so, because there is no cookie cutter approach to case studies and stories. Ultimately, I could give you I don't know, 7 different slides, let's say, or 5 different slides divided into the storytelling methods I was describing earlier in the stream. But what you put in it shouldn't be constrained by a bloody template. You should start telling a story like what Jose did. Let me just pull it back up if I can. What Jose did, he just used text and outlined that. This is what you should start with. make an outline, and then figure out how you're gonna tell it in a template. Then find a template. If you ever even need a template, just tell a good story, write it up, add some contextual bits which support your statements, which could illustrate it better visually, and you're golden. It's like, don't start with a tool, start with thinking, with a system, with a method in place, with what you want to achieve, the plan. Because otherwise you're just gonna kind of run out of ideas or limit yourself way too soon. Tell a really, really good story first. That should be an aim. And again, I might publish that Figma template. Let me know if you want it, but I'm gonna publish it with a massive caveat that, hey, you might just ruin your chances if you follow any type of template. You can't template a bloody, movie or a story. That's what makes things captivating. The movies, the songs, the books, they're captivating because they tell a bloody good story, and how they tell it is very, very specific and unique, and that's why they're so good for a specific user. Or, case study could be, I'm your user, I'm your, let's say, hiring manager, when you would cater it to me. Anyhow, I digress, but you should get my point, basically. And yeah, let's carry on. Let's do the next one, which I opened by accident. What you can see on my screen right now is another Notion template, which is, again, it kind of highlights how common it becomes that people are using Notion to write their different case studies up and make their stories. And this one is by Matia, and as you can see, they like a lot of other people outline exactly where it came from, so like giving me cred that, hey, I kind of challenge them. You don't have to do that. Like, you could refer it in a way, but if you're gonna do in your case study, you don't really have to do that. I appreciate it though. It's good call out. To cancel a service, the journey lasts 28 minutes, so we're like making it that. Then Miro link, the challenge itself, how might we make it, and then highlighting that users would like to cancel a Vodafone service in just a few clicks without wasting too much time on a phone. But is this your hypothesis? Because I could immediately, let me see if I can edit it. No, I can't. I would just add it like, this is the hypothesis I have in place, and this is what I'm going to try to prove or disprove in my research and design efforts. So be specific. Your roles: UX researcher, UX designer, UI designer. Just say UX, and then say what did you do basically going forward. Just outline the activities. Duration 1 month is great that you took 1 month. And design process, design thinking is where you might be like, it's very sensitive thing. UX is not design thinking. Design thinking is not UX. Design sprints is not UX. I have videos on that, and I try to make it as simple as possible to define it. But be very careful what you say, because the hiring managers who are like proper UX hardcore UXers, they might scrutinize it a lot, and they're gonna be like now looking like, oh, do you know what design thinking is? Oh, do you know what UX? Are you using both? How does it transition from one to the other? Things of that nature. So just, like outline the activities you made, and that's about it. Like, for example, design thinking has its place to me. It's controversial, but I believe in every tool, in every method. Design sprints are lovely, and design thinking is amazing, and UX is also a really good thing, an essential thing. But all of them kind of tie in different type of activities, different phases of a project. They're much more appropriate in certain areas than the others. So just be careful that you are actually not shooting yourself in the foot. Project overview. So you outline those metrics I shared. You outline the goals of a business, which is great. You outline about Vodafone as well. You could make it a bit more visual, maybe, I don't know, like a lot of text. And then you go into discovery, which I loved, by the way, because Matia is giving these anecdotal examples, which are, like if that doesn't put a smile on your face, I don't know what would. But this hammers the point of the issue. You can say that the issue of people is that it's very hard to cancel, but if you can demonstrate it like that, it automatically hammers it down. So contract is like getting blood from a stone. It's almost impossible. I agree to that. My personal pain point too. He also highlights average waiting time for getting a reply from 191, which maybe is their support line, is 33 minutes. So you see, he didn't just go and did an extensive secondary research on Vodafone's website, forum, Reddit, social networks. He also extracted these bits, which I'm like, yeah, I don't need to know anything more just at a glance when I'm skimming it, because I see that you thought about it and you're illustrating it rightfully. Simple as that. And then you are also saying that one community champion forum states, I believe, so you also looked for opportunities, meaning that you didn't just look for pain points. You also said, oh, what do people say? What do they request? What features do you want? Which is really good because you go for gain points as much as pain points. And the quantitative data from Twitter. So basically you're saying by reading tweets, very specific, oddly specific for teams, so you can just say that for 24 hours you were reading it. You counted 101 tweets from people complaining about process, about Vodafone, and over 31 days, an average 3 tweets were complaints about cancellation. Awesome point. Just think about how you can better represent or maybe bold it out so it's clear. I don't have to read through it. And then you did a survey. So you created a short survey that helped me to get some demographic information, get deep understanding of people's needs and struggles. The survey was composed of closed questions, yada yada, explaining it. Yep, but who did you send it to? That's where I would be like, again, it comes down to the user, to the targeting, to your thinking, decision making, appropriate focus in the segmentation of it. And 6 people out of 7 trying to cancel a service provided by Vodafone for themselves, but there could be times where people, so you have a lot of insights. Love the quant data. I mean, a lot of people skip it in UX, especially juniors. If you can do this and then follow up with interviews, dig deeper, you're gonna be golden. Customer journeys, so you mapped it out. I would argue that might not be enough for you because quantitative surveys are for attitudes. You can kind of capture some of the behaviors, but on a super high level if you have open-ended questions, but then you need thousands of applicants. So I would be careful mapping the experience if you only did the quant analysis of a survey. You're just not gonna have enough material. Sorry, I'm gonna have a sip. Cool. So yeah, so you wouldn't have enough material to actually make it rich. And then you did some key findings, tech savvy, stuff like that. You outline it again, make it clear. Like you could just literally put Miro post-it notes screenshot here and just make it much more scannable for me. You know, you can kind of extract it. Think of a ways you can immediately tell a story without going too deep into it, unless I want to look into it. Then you define personas, 2 of them, simple, straight to the point, cool. I'm not gonna go too deep into it because we would spend hours here, but I can see immediately that you are not wasting your time. You kind of have a good idea, minus that probably you didn't have immediate access to like one-to-one, maybe, I don't know, to research and qualitative side to observe the behaviors and capture that way. You went and outlined the problem for the users, I guess you reiterated, but that's where I would be like, link it to your hypothesis you did in the beginning and just say if it's right or not and to what extent. So kind of tells the story, it builds up, it doesn't jump from one thing to the other. And how might we retain, allow, free customer service, increase, all greatly framed. And then constraints as well. Cool. As per other point about how might we, this is where you probably would end up with hundreds of items. If you can see on my screen, you're gonna end up with hundreds of items, or you should, per each of your how might we's. How did you prioritize? If you just joined late, make sure to go back midstream. I'm giving this micro lesson of how you could prioritize, or how you could think to prioritize, and why should you. Because it could be that you just jump into very high level decisions or ideas, but you should really come up with loads of it and then converge into something meaningful, prioritize. Some of the suggested improvements cannot be shown in this case study since they require Vodafone's effort to be implemented. Absolutely fair. User flows, so you did some information architecture thinking. sketches as well. Cool. That's really cool. I like that you invested time on paper. You prototyped it as well, used my name. Awesome. So you build up on a requirement from before and maybe use the screenshots. And I guess you allow just simply cancel from there. Just choose a plan cancellation and that's done. And you can leave feedback. Final thoughts as well. And things of that nature. But before that, again, you went very quickly into the digital realm, into the your home tweets obviously were very focused towards doing something with the digital solutions. There's so much more you could be doing around it as well. That's worth capturing too, even if it's out of scope for you. For your growth as a designer, you should capture all of that because, you know, eventually you're going to become much more strategic and you're going to need to think about all the knock-on effects around your digital touchpoints as much as this type of solutionizing. And you have link, you're saying that you're going to improve your research skills, you're able to maze up running usability tests, things of that nature. You might be a bit more maybe precise exactly with the results, and then also what's the next step for a project itself. What would you need? How would you approach it? You could even simulate and say Vodafone should contact you because you're that, you know, these are your ideas and this is what we should be doing. You can be bold. You can say, are you working at Vodafone? Contact me, I can help you out, your email or something along those lines. Like, just be bolder basically as well with a call to action, but ultimately tell me the next steps. Like, do you think this is done and dusted, or could you do a bit more? And I'm sure you're thinking I could probably do a little bit more, or maybe run a round of research and maybe find people to interview qualitatively and kind of like get it done basically. And let me just address a few questions as well. That's cool. I see that but would Vodafone really care people complaining how difficult it is to cancel other choices? They wouldn't until it reaches a bottom line. This is my point again. It's very hard to quantify the customer experience or lack thereof, or poor customer experience, but it's very easy to do so when it comes too late. And this is why I think, you know, every other person here who participated, they had to reflect, to think about what matters to business, but also to the customers, and then reflect exactly what measures could be used as the evidence. Because now, let's say, and I'm replying to Upside Down Crypto, now let's say you have 7 people, 7 case studies who have solutions and ideas and research. This could be the evidence. You know, for example, a manager or a designer at Vodafone can use and say, hey, this prick V online called us out, and he thinks that, you know, we need to address this cancellation flow. And these are all the other people in the design community with the measures and outcomes. This is the evidence. Would it be enough? I have no idea. Depends who you target, who you want to approach. But it would be enough at least to have a conversations with immediate leadership, and then maybe with a senior leadership. Maybe use this and just call out Vodafone and, you know, make a PR stunt. Not saying you should, but I'm just saying there's a lot of ways to influence things. The easiest way is not to do anything. So, you know, I'm glad that people committed. And also, it's a selfish good thing because you have real issues around you, a side project idea, and you can make a case study out of it. This is the best bit. All these 7 people now made a freaking case studies or are in the making of them. They can tweak it and they can actually start applying for UX positions because they had a chance to apply their knowledge, if that makes sense. But implementing cancellations will reduce their profits possibly. Of course they will, but also you need to quantify the return customers, because I just canceled my Vodafone contract, right? I'm unlikely to resubscribe next time I need to change a provider, and people change the providers quite often. At least a fraction of them. I'm just making a hypothesis and just asking out loud and thinking out loud. You could quantify that, and you can state that customer loyalty over long term matters a shitload. And sorry for my language, matters a crap load, because your net, your market might expand a lot, but you're always competing for the customers. All those telecom companies, they have I don't know, let's say 1 million different customers, random number, right? They're always taking one to one side. They're pulling people back and forth. If there's a big movement and they don't improve the customer experience, eventually that could pick up a momentum and could, actually result in the profits lost. So yeah, this is cool. Thanks so much for all the submissions. And by the way, before I run off, because there are a few different bits raised, I'm gonna add a link in the actual chat for people to join our Discord. If I can, let me just see. I'm just on my Discord itself. I'm gonna limit that to 7 days because we're still in a closed beta, well, pilot. Let's call it a open pilot, a public or private pilot. And I'm gonna just generate this link and you can join freely. Make sure to introduce yourself, make sure to add some notes, share some bits, ask questions, engage with other people. Thanks again so much for everyone participating. If you haven't participated, do it anyways. You don't need, you can get my feedback as one of the portfolio reviews eventually. There's a massive list, but if you run out of time, and a lot of people commented on a brief, hey, I didn't have enough time to do this, I saw this way too late, just do it anyways. This is the idea, is to also participate in a community, but for you to have ideas for side projects. So do it. I mean, schedule some time, maybe do it a few weeks, 3 months, half a year effort. Do it as in deep as you can, but you have actual issue to solve, and you can document it and make it a decent case study and make a decent evidence portfolio, which is going to result in, better opportunities. And for everyone else who, let's say, participated, I would again challenge you to go further, apply all those feedback notes, edit as much as you can, try to think about not just your feedback you received, but what everyone else received. And this is a call to everyone who's watching who didn't participate as well. You can have a think of all those factors I was just voicing out loud and giving feedback on, and giving questions and hypotheses from hiring manager perspective, and you're gonna be like, oh, I could probably apply this. And I'm sure you at least took at least one thing away from this. If not, rewatch it. There's definitely going to be some feedback notes you can apply to your case studies and your work, and you can make it so much better. So thanks so much for everyone tuning in. I hope this is useful. Leave the comment down below what you think about it. We're almost 2 hours in as well. This is a record live stream. I'm really surprised we could go through that much of deconstruction and feedback and everything in between. If you want to do another challenge, do let me know. I have a few ideas already. If you have your ideas and you want to kind of share it with the community, join the Discord, share it down below, smash that like button, share with someone who would benefit from this. And as per usual, I'll see you next time. So thanks so much, everyone, and until next time.